My name is Archana Kotecha. I'm the Asia Region Director and Head of Legal with Liberty Shared, and I am currently Hong Kong based, but I'm originally from Mauritius, and I have been living in Hong Kong for the last 11 years. So my work is very trafficking and forced labor focused, and the work is very diverse. So on the one hand, with one hat, I do a lot of training on anti-money laundering and human trafficking with banks and financial regulators, financial intelligence units in the region. And on the other hand, I do a lot of work on access to justice issues, so working with NGOs on identifying promising cases, working with them on developing the cases. I do a lot of judges training, law enforcement training, and general policy and advocacy work. More recently, I've been doing a fair amount of advisory work for governments as well. I think trafficking is the exploitation of people for commercial gain. People are at the center of this offense. The people whose rights are exploited, the people who are exploiting those whose rights are being exploited. There is a whole network of perpetrators, and the vulnerability of the victims is such that it does warrant taking a human rights based approach, because if one were just to focus on the criminal justice approach of let's prosecute the perpetrators and bang them up and that is justice, that doesn't do much for where we need to be thinking about in terms of victim care, protection, rehabilitation, reintegration. So it is really important to take a rights-based approach so that you are meeting victims halfway. You are able to help them get back on their feet after the experience they've had, but also every criminal justice approach will be left incomplete and dull if it's not for the victim care that breathes life into it. Most trafficking cases still rely on victims to be key witnesses. If you're not going to care for your victim will not be a witness for you. It's as simple as that. So it is essential to have this at the heart of the counter-trafficking movement. I attended the previous two iterations of this meeting, and the highlight for me is the connection, the discussions, the analysis, the on-the-ground perspectives from people who are present in the room. It's wonderful because everybody comes from such diverse places, from such diverse movements, and to be able to sit in a room together and to brainstorm, to think things through, to disagree with each other, to agree with each other, to call each other out, and to be controversial. This really is the space to do that. And I always find when I leave after these sessions, I do feel really energized, having made new friends. And I think one of the most important aspects of combating trafficking has to be building of a cross-border movement. And this definitely, and a cross-sector and a cross-discipline movement, and this definitely allows us to do that. One of the things that has held the counter-trafficking movement back is the fact that we don't collaborate with each other enough. We compete for funding, we often compete for the same public space, the same attention, the same relationships that are beneficial, relationships with government, relationships with other NGOs, with victim groups, with community groups, etc. It doesn't make collaboration come quite naturally, or any kind of sharing. And I think sometimes the platforms where people can collaborate with each other are also not there in many cases. So this has led to people working in silos. We often replicate what others are doing because we don't really know what they're doing. And therefore, now more than ever, as we face formidable opponents in the private sector who are very well oiled, very well organized and up for the challenge, and also states who respond well to multiple NGOs coming together and calling them out, it is important that we build this cross-sector movement and we do garner allies in different corners so that we are speaking from one perspective, we are speaking with one voice. We stand to make a lot more difference against the private sector and the state by doing this, and also we would better serve the beneficiary groups that we're all trying to protect. If you haven't already started looking at how labor justice mechanisms mesh with counter-trafficking measures, then you're missing a trick. It's time to go back to the drawing board and to think about it again. If you're not thinking about how finding the money that comes from trafficking or from other forms of exploitation of vulnerable migrant workers or others, then you're missing a trick too, because people are exploited for commercial gain. And unless the counter-trafficking measures are targeting that gain, our efforts are always going to be incomplete. So labor standards all the way, and also where is the money? and who's backing it and who's accountable for it.